Hi.
Hey,
Hi, everyone.
shall we also now, if I just reintroduce Nick and Maria, and then I'll pass over to you, Beth, and you can ask us some questions for half an hour, 40 minutes, and then we can pass over to the audience. They can do some Q&A, and then we can wrap this all up. So next up is Maria Uzor, who is one half of Sink Your Teeth, musician, brilliant, jumper wearer, excellent hoop earrings. Hey, Maria.
Yeah, hi. You're right. Hello, everyone.
Owner of the Best Living Room. And next up we have...
It's not real.
What's not real?
It's a backdrop. It's not real.
Oh, obviously. And next up we have one of the best haired producers in the arts in the UK. He's also a wonderful man, a very talented artist. Please welcome Nick Murray.
Hello. Hi.
Hey!
What an introduction.
Oh, I could have gone like way more flowery on both of you, but I thought, and if we ever manage to do this in real life, then I'll be flowery and get the entire audience to whoop and holler your names.
Fantastic.
But for now, should we pass over to Beth?
Okay, so the first thing I'm really interested to know is, what do you love the most about what you do? Maybe, who would like to go first? Maybe Maria?
Yeah, okay. I make music, and I perform on stage as well. I write music, and in this actual room, at this desk, and I produce music as well. And I think what I love about it is having the opportunity to, like as Lewis was saying earlier, put your feelings into something creative and then sharing that with an audience or with a group of people, and that kind of like feedback, bounce back thing that you get from that. That's kind of what keeps me going and why I do what I do, because it's just a lovely feeling.
Hello. So what do I love doing in my career, in my jobs? So actually, I was actually doing the lists that Lewis was getting us to do before. It was really useful. Like, it was really good to see. And from my list, I can see that I really love telling stories. Like that's the kind of fundamental goal for all of the work I'm doing. And what I really enjoy is kind of having the opportunity and kind of giving myself the invitation to just tell them in like whatever way I want. So whether that's through like poetry or performance or games, like having the chance to experiment and just kind of play around has been really wonderful.
I think that's a great point actually, Nick, because I think like everyone has their own story to tell. Everyone is individual, and no one's got the same voice, no one's got the same story. So
Absolutely.
A career in art allows you to put that element of your individuality, or contribute that element of your individuality to the rest of the world, however small or large it may be.
100%.
Beautiful.
Sort of like linking those two things, and so like that individuality of story, the thing that Nick said about just wanting to tell stories in whatever form, and the thing you were saying, Maria, about feedback, like the feedback loop of like audience, performer or artist, however you get your work out. I think it's an incredibly like kind and generous act on everyone's part, right? To tell your story and to entertain someone in some way, because that's what we do, right? We entertain people with jesters, we're clowns, and we just go, hey, here's my story. That I think is a really generous act because it gives somebody entertainment, but also someone hearing that story, and especially if it's a story really distant from them, if they have an entirely different perspective on the world, I think it's a really kind and generous act of them to take it and to be like, hey man, I really liked that, and that feedback loop is really gratifying in that way. I think that's what I love most, is that sense of, I always talk about it like just talking to people, because I absolutely love talking to people, and it's why I perform. And actually when I publish, I find it weird that like a book goes out into the world and people don't immediately laugh at a joke that I've told or something. But talking performing always feels like a point of connection and generosity to me, and that's what I love about it.
Mm-hmm.
And where do you find inspiration?
Maria, do you want to take it?
Yeah, okay.
Gives me time to think.
Inspiration comes from everywhere, doesn't it? Absolutely everywhere. It can come from, I can hear a car alarm go off or something, and that can start an idea for a song. I can watch TV and something's going on in a movie or something, and that can inspire me. Just you walk past someone in the street and you hear them go, yeah, I wouldn't do that. And that can spark something. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of, it can come from anywhere, as well as obviously, I mean, they're all external things, but you can find inspiration within yourself, like how you're feeling. If you're feeling down on a particular day or particularly jovial on another day, then you might draw inspiration from that. It's just about being open to keeping your eyes, your ears and your heart open to the voices. You know, how they present themselves, you know, how the world presents inspiration to you. So yeah,
I think Maria's covered it like perfectly. It's exactly that. Like, inspiration is kind of everywhere and it's everything. Like, I think the only thing I'd want to add to that is that, like, what Maria says about being receptive is just so on point, because actually, like, the inspiration for your piece of poetry might not have anything to do with poetry or words even. Like, it could come from like a song or a piece of food, or like just the feeling you had when you woke up one day. Like, I think inspiration is cross genre, which is great. Yeah, you kind of just need to be receptive and think that like your inspiration will come from anywhere, and it's just what you turn it into.
And don't limit yourself, and realize that art is anything. Art can be anything. You can create anything. There are no rules. You don't have to be like, oh, I'm writing a song, therefore I need to listen to music to come up with the ideas to write a song. You know, just throw all that out the window and just speak with your own voice. And you know.
That's literally the most exciting sentence ever. You can make anything.
Yeah,
anything. It's so cool.
I think that the only thing I'd add is like, I think it builds on what you're saying about like being open and receptive, is also to be like, I think the best artists, but also the best people. So there are a lot of people who might be listening who are like, oh, I'd prefer to be like an arts facilitator, or like, I don't necessarily want to be an artist in and of myself. And so like the best people, I think, are two things. They are interesting and they're interested. And I think that like, if you are interested in the world, if you are interested in that car alarm, if you are interested in that book by Terence Hayes, if you are interested in that weird installation that's just gone up in the middle of town, then firstly, that makes you interesting. So you've covered the first thing, because if you are interested in other people, they'll be interested in you. And I think it helps that I actually find it terrifying when people are like, you can make anything. I'm like, oh, I feel I'm only able to make these small poems. But like, and so like, and I think perhaps that's because that's all I'm interested in doing right now. And so like,
that's the thing, you can make any poems.
Well, exactly, yeah.
That's what I mean. So.
No, completely. I think it's just it's a different temperament, that's all. But like, when I know I become interested and I become obsessed with things, and so in answer to the original question, like my inspiration comes from being absolutely obsessed with things. So like at the moment I am obsessed with Liverpool football manager Jurgen Klopp. It's not come up in a poem yet. Oh no, it did the other day, because he said a really fascinating thing. He was like at a press conference trying to find his glasses, and he said, do you know, it's really difficult trying to find glasses when you don't have glasses. And I was like, that seems like some philosophical thought on something. So, and I'm just researching and finding out loads about Jurgen Klopp. And I've no idea if it'll take me anywhere or if it will actually inspire me. But for me, that's the first step, is like just being interested in something, and whatever it is that each individual person is interested in, right?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think like a lot of us, we can try hard, particularly when we're younger as well, to be interesting. But as you say, I think the key to that is just be interested, and everything else will come from that. Don't worry about sort of trying to appear as this interesting kind of, you know, person that everyone's like, oh wow, look at her, or wow, look at him, just be fascinated by the world in which you live in, and you will by default become this interesting person. Yeah, totally.
As I learned, wearing skinny jeans and Doc Martens does not make you interesting. you just look a bit interesting, and then someone talks to you and they're like, oh, actually no, he just keeps talking about his cherry red Doc Martens.
I think that covers that.
How did you guys get started in your career? For example, Lewis, did you always know you wanted to be a poet? And if you did you feel like that was a career option for you?
No, I don't even, I'm not even entirely sure I want to be a poet now. I love it, but sort of going back to like openness and stuff, and going back on what I said about like only feeling like I can do poems. Like I always hope that I am creative, but I hope that if I decided like actually I'm really interested in doing this whole other thing, then I would happily not leave poetry behind, but be able to change and make anything, as we've covered. I don't think I always knew that I was going to be a poet. I remember like being 7 years old in the way that lots of 7-year-olds do, say like, you know, I'm going to be a space cowboy writer, and always loving books and loving talking and loving words. But I don't think I always wanted to be a poet. I got going in poetry because I went to Latitude Festival and saw some poets on the poetry stage there, and then read a bunch of poetry and went to a bunch of open mics when I lived in London, saw a bunch of poets that I thought were really cool, and I decided to imitate them. But I don't know about you other guys. Like, did you always want to be creatives, musicians?
I always wanted to be an artist. When I was a kid, I went through that whole sort of thing of I always wanted to be like in the band. I wanted to be a painter. I wanted to be an inventor, fashion designer. I never actually felt that music was a career path that I could take for a long time. I don't know why. Maybe it's the family that I came from. It just felt like, I know you need to get a proper job, you know. So I always used to kind of like not talk about it, and it used to be like my little secret, my dirty little secret, you know, like music. Oh, I'd love to do music. But then I'd sort of like, you know, go to uni and pursue these other paths. And then eventually I just thought, oh, I'm gonna do it, you know. So I did, and it's been the best decision that I've made. But as Lewis says as well, I think it's also really important to try not to define yourself too much by your by what you choose to do, because once again it comes down to openness, and if you feel then ready to move on to another area of creativity or something, if you define yourself too fully as, oh, I'm Maria, I'm the musical artist in this band, or I'm the film set designer or something like that, then that can kind of limit you once you feel ready to move on. So so I think it's important to kind of allow yourself. It's just about identifying. It's identifying too much with something can be not good. It just depends on where you are. Just depends on where you are.
Do you? So you know, you said you like made a decision to be a musician. Do you like? Can you like pinpoint that? Can you go like, this is the day that I made that decision, or can you pinpoint like the sort of time in your life when that happened?
Yeah, I was always writing songs, but I never did anything with them. I never shared them or anything. And then I reached the point where I thought, oh God, one night I put an ad online just asking for some band members to perform my songs live. And then I was just like, sort of shut the computer and just thought, oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen. And then they got in contact the next day and just said, oh, we're this garage punk band and we're looking for a singer, guitarist. And I didn't respond to it for like 2 weeks because I was just like, oh no, I don't know what to do. And then I eventually just bit the bullet, went to a rehearsal, and and it kind of worked out, and that was the first band that I was in, this kind of punk band, and that was a really good way of kind of breaking yourself into it, because I was just on stage screaming, which is like, if you're feeling really nervous or shy about something, then just going on stage, it's like perfect. So my music's probably changed a bit since then, but yeah, that was kind of the moment, I think.
Posting that thing online, I think, is really yeah, I remember the first time I signed up for an open mic and like emailed somebody and was like, hey, could I possibly maybe, I don't know, if it's okay with you, not if it's too much bother, could I maybe I don't know, maybe come and perform? I don't know, but don't, no, actually ignore. It's like scary.
Yeah, absolutely terrifying.
I'm sure we all just had a visceral feeling hearing you say that off the time we all did that.
Yeah.
Sending that one message out, be like, oh God, what am I doing?
What did people do before the internet? Like, just like rocked up at someone's garage and was like, hey, can I be in your band?
What was your time, Nick, that you...
So actually, like, I've been like, while we've been talking, I've been trying to cast my mind back, and actually, I wanted to be a marine biologist. Like, that was my dream. I thought that was the coolest job. I thought, like, that's a job and it's cool. Like, I love everything about that. But while that was happening, this was like, I was what? In my really early teens. All the time this was happening, I was still like painting and writing and all of this, and realized that actually, like, I wasn't putting that much into doing marine biology. I was just making art all the time. And then slowly realized, maybe I'm an artist. Maybe that's what I want to do. And that's probably like the big drastic shift. After that, and like this is really just kind of elaborating on Maria's point about kind of self-identifying, and like you don't need to kind of categorize yourself. I feel like categories are more for other people, like particularly reviewers and academics, than they are for the people making the art themselves. Like, after marine biology, I knew I wanted to be a classical musician. So I had like a string quartet, and that was really great, which then shifted into, but actually I think sculpture's where I want to be, and then went into sculpture for a bit, which then turned into like sound art, and that was a dark time calling myself a sound artist for a while. But after all of these, like, what I realized as I was doing them and changing was that they're all the same thing. I'm just using a different medium. I'm using the medium that responds to me the best at the time, which is why at the moment, like, I kind of share my time between producing other artists and performers and making my own work that is very specifically digital at the moment. Like, a lot of it is interactive poetry based work. Some of it's kind of half real life, half digital stuff. A lot of it fits under this kind of space of video games. But again, I'm basically still making the same piece of work that I've been like trying to research and make for the last like 15 years.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's the thing over and over again, but in different ways. Yeah, totally.
Exactly, yeah.
So like, just hearing you like talk about like that evolution of different things makes me, I think I'm not as consistent as you, but like makes me feel like comfortable enough to own up to the time when I was like 16 to 19, when I like used to play guitar and write songs and like go and do gigs around London, and I think in about 3 years I think I made £70, and but like thinking about it as like part of my evolution as an artist, rather than this thing that I feel a bit cringy about now and sort of hope people don't look too deep into YouTube.
You've opened that kind of worms now, though.
Yeah.
well. Oh God. But like, I've got so much hair. It's just, but like, there was that, and that also makes me think, because I always think in some part of my head, I'm like, I've got this like skill, not a talent, but like I can play a guitar. And I'd really like to be able to bring it back at some point in my career to intersect with all the stuff that I'm writing at the moment. And like, yeah, I think the struggle that I often find with that, like moving from one thing to another, is that if you shift discipline, So if you have been like working in video games and then you're like, cool, I want to write a novel, there is this, I don't know if you guys find this, there is this like wave of if you try and get funding or you try and like get gigs or whatever, about people being like, prove yourself. Like, you've never proved yourself writing a novel before. You've only done video games. And I find that really difficult. I find that like that shift, trying to shift from one thing to another, when people want to box you in, people want to say like, no, you're this, and you're very accomplished in that, but like, that's not the same as this. Does that make sense to you?
That's that categorization thing again, isn't it? Like, it's very, people need to have a tag or a label to be able to kind of put you in a place so they know how to take your stuff in, and that makes perfect sense. But it does make it really difficult on the other side. Like, elaborating on that, like the thing that I found most difficult going from discipline to discipline is actually like less the kind of almost bureaucratic and like application side, but actually like moving disciplines means you have to kind of start finding your peer group again. And that can be a little bit difficult. I've kind of realized that the way to get over that is actually just like the same artists that you love and respect from before still love and respect your work now, and like you've been talking to them about the fact that your work is about like nature or loss or whatever, it just happens to look slightly different. So yeah, trust yourself if you do change disciplines. Trust yourself and trust your peers who already respect your work and are going to stay there, going to keep kind of chatting to you,
and ask them for help, right?
Exactly.
Like
every single time. Yeah.
Sorry, Beth, we should go back. Do you another question?
Oh, hi, Beth, you're right.
Really interesting. Like, following on from that, how do you go about meeting like-minded people in the industry? Do you go to events, or maybe looking at social media, or?
Nick and I got drunk. That's how we met. We met in a bar.
That's halfway through the story. It was an arts event.
It was an arts event. It was an arts event.
I like to say that we met at an arts event.
The answer to your question is yes. And you don't have to drink, kids.
Exactly. Leading on from that, yes. If you're doing work and you want to put some of it out there, that's a very good way of finding people who are interested in your work and who you might want to talk to. It's a really difficult time right now for going to events, obviously, so you can't really go out and find the other people who are doing the same thing. But in a kind of general life, whatever that was, it's coming back, I promise. You can go, find artists who are doing the same kind of thing as you, and in a really similar way to what we were saying so much earlier in this, off feeling really worried to put your email out to the person writing your open mic. They actually really like it. Like, most people love talking about the work that they do if you're interested in that kind of work as well. So kind of like just get out there, just send that tweet. Like, it's a great way to start.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that. And like, as they say, now isn't a good time to go out, but gigging, that's where we sort of like met most people, and that's where the most things that we've got have kind of like what's the word? Not catapulted.
Just the word.
Catapulted? Well, catapulted sounds like it's gone pew. It hasn't.
It's just accumulated.
Catalyzed.
Catalyzed. Yeah. It's been like gigs.
You can see we all right, don't you?
Yeah. We're really.
We're workshopping now.
Snowballing? No, that's a cliche.
But yeah, gigs have kind of been a catalyst for meeting like-minded people, people in bands and stuff, and also some people in the industry as well. So that's kind of it for us, where it's kind of happened for us.
Yeah.
As a quick flip side, sorry, Liz, I'm just jumping just there. Like, as for people who are watching who maybe don't want to perform, like, because actually, like, I have quite a love-hate relationship with performance. Sometimes I'm really into it. Sometimes I absolutely don't want to do it. Like, there are ways outside of performing to kind of meet, and that could be through like sharing some work on a website and kind of asking, like literally saying in the intro to like your poem or your game or your picture, like, I am interested in feedback. Like, every so often you will get someone like that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of music, I mean, there's sharing sites like SoundCloud and things like that where you can post your songs and, you know, people can comment and give feedback and things like that.
And if the basis for that isn't fame, right? Like I remember being 17 and putting stuff on what was then MySpace, and thinking like, right, this is going to get me famous, like Lily Allen and the Arctic Monkeys. And I have since learned that if your intention isn't fame, it's community, then people notice that. So if you go up to a producer at an event and you say, hey, I'm Lewis, I write poems, I really love this, and I'd love to be involved in some way, that I think that producer is far more receptive than being like, hey, I'm Lewis, you should put me on your stage because I'm the best. Like, if you are interested in building communities, then you will build a career out of that community. And if you are just bullheaded, like you go in first, all guns blazing, some people love that. So grand, but like speaking as an arts producer, like I am open to anyone. And if anyone, which is a good point to say, contact at toastpoetry.com. If you are over 18 and want to get involved in the arts, then you can email me and I will always sit down and have a Zoom or in real life a coffee with somebody, as long as you live in Norwich. Like I'm not gonna like drive to Scarborough just to find you, but like I'm up for a chat about these things and I'm up for that sort of community building. And I mean that's just the thing that I feel is incumbent upon me as somebody who's been doing this for 10 years to be like, here's how you might start doing that. But yeah, all of that stuff about building and meeting communities and like-minded people, going back to your question, Beth, like can both happen online and in person. But I think it's important to say that it doesn't just value extroverts who shout, because I'm an extrovert who shouts, and that's not why I'm successful. That's not why I have a career in the arts.
I'm an introvert, and I like reading books and I like staying in, but I also like jumping around on stage, acting the fool. So
yeah,
how that works, who knows?
Well, it's not a binary, right? It's again categories and labels. But I just always want to. I always want to say that for the people out there who are like, I'm kind of quiet and I'm not really into shouting at people, but I do like shouting on stage. Being like, that's cool, man. Like, either just go and shout on stage, send a quiet email, whatever. We're open to it.
Yeah, definitely. And I realised that having a creative career, or really any career, can be tricky at times. Have you faced any barriers or obstacles? And if so, how do you, I guess, overcome them or overcome these challenges or try and navigate through them?
Paying the mortgage or paying the rent, that's a barrier.
Finances,
particularly this year, it's you do that. I've got a day job. I need a day job, particularly this year. My income has plummeted hugely due to COVID, but it's okay. It's you know, it's fine. And but there is that thing of like, because the income from the arts can be sporadic, then it's kind of good to always have like something on the back burner, working in a bar, and you'll find that a lot of people who are in the arts do work in bars or restaurants, or, you know, are teachers. I'm a teacher, and it's, you know, that kind of thing, just having one foot in another pot, just in case you don't get that income from the arts, then at least you can still make rent. Yeah, so that's one thing.
Yeah, like finance will always be a kind of tough bedfellow for the arts, because like you want to make stuff, like we were saying at the beginning, you make stuff because you have to, like, and sometimes having to make your work doesn't mean that you get to kind of share it out there. Like I started, like I was a teacher for quite a long time, teaching kind of music privately, as a way to kind of supplement being an artist. Like since then I've been kind of lucky enough to move closer and closer to my day job being an arts job as well. So I think that's actually the way I kind of overcame the pitfall of supporting myself to make work. Like, and it actually goes back to these handy lists we made at the beginning that think about the things that you love and the things that you're good at, and if you can slowly take like steps towards those, then you can have a day job that sits like in partnership, if not is like your artistic career. Like, and when I say like, I realized that was probably slightly vague. My day job is kind of production for things, so that's a lot of arts admin and kind of budgeting and kind of logistics and things, but they are still things that I really love because they are facilitating other artists to make beautiful work. Yeah, I guess that's the way I kind of try to overcome barriers within my creative arts, get them as close as possible to the thing I love and use that as a stepping stone.
But I think finance will always be something that, and it's important to note that it manifests differently for different people. So like, I always think it's useful to acknowledge that like at the beginning of my career, so I went to university when I was 18, and then from when I was 21 to I was 24, so that is 3 quite significant years, I lived in London with my parents, and that gave me a lot of like financial privilege. It didn't solve all of my problems, but like it helped enormously in a way that other people aren't necessarily helped by the society that we live in, the system we live in. However, whilst acknowledging that, I think it's also worthwhile saying that there are so many people who don't work themselves to death, don't like live miserable lives scraping at getting money, and have built a sustainable artistic practice along with finance. And I think that's important to know. And like places like, I can sort of only speak for writers, but like National Centre for Writing, Spread the Word in London, the Poetry Society, lots of these places, the Society of Authors, the National Association of Writers in Education, all have like guidance on, if you are a writer and want to make a living out of it, have guidance on how you might do that. And that thing about day jobs, and I think this is really, again, speaking quite specifically in Norfolk, that thing about working in a cafe, working in a bar, whatever it is, and also being a writer, being an artist. I think some people think of them as a totally different, and some people think of them as really blended, really like, you know, part of their artistic practice is that they get up and go to work each day and then write in the evenings, or they work 3 days on and then they've got the other days to make art. And so it's about like how you want to organize your time, and like Nick said, like how you get closer and closer to organizing everything around. So like I organize everything in my life around poetry. That involves teaching, it involves, as Nick said, like production, making budgets, doing funding applications, trying to get events off the ground, trying to get people to buy tickets to events, and it also it's education, teaching poetry, and so yeah, it is always this sort of like patchwork career, but it's important that is a thing that can bring so much joy, and it's not a thing that I do or that we do and it's a pain. It can be difficult sometimes, but I do believe quite hard in working smart rather than working hard, and the arts not being something that breaks you down and makes you give up. Like, you can do it. I believe in anybody who is watching can do this. And there are places that will support you, like Young Norfolk Arts.
I think it's probably also quite important to kind of just cover just any other like obstacles. So like we've talked about finance and money, and that's, while it's huge, it's one aspect. Like other, just kind of off the top of my head, things that I struggle with, like especially right now, is like isolation being a real killer for creativity. And I assume that there will be kind of other people out there who feel this too. Like I'm sure that it's a real problem at the moment, and kind of ways to get past that are trying to reach out to people, you know, who like, they don't also have to be artists, but people who are interested in things that you're interested in is a great way to spark conversation and then find that inspiration to try and kind of make something again. And also like just making sure you're not making things to then sell off, or like to be a kind of physical thing afterwards. Like if you're struggling to make things, then make something just because it's funny or fun. Like I I'll make things that take like half an hour because it's hilarious, and then I'll just God. So I'm sure this will come up at some point, just in terms of something that broke me out of a rut. Not even making work. I decided when I couldn't make any work for ages and ages, like I wanted to see what my work looked like, to see where I needed to go next. So I made myself a new website, and I decided to make the domain name, instead of .com, .horse, because that's hilarious to me. And now every time I'm in a professional meeting, they're like, "Oh, so what's your website?" It's .horse. I crack up, and then like that has brought me so much joy throughout all of this time. And actually, like, while the kind of joke of it was like a kind of sideline part, that does remind me every time of that time when I kind of had to make my website again and think about like the work that I do, that actually like being kind of isolated or depressed or alone or kind of whatever that might be kind of taking its toll on your life, like remember that you make really good work already. Like you make work that makes you happy. So
yeah,
that's the thing, isn't it?
I would echo that. Like I think this is different for every different artist, but for anyone who needs to hear it, a big obstacle for me is, like, for want of better words, struggles with mental health and anxiety, right? When I find myself in particular sort of psychological states, I don't make good work. I make my best work when I'm comfortable, when I'm happy, when I am, exactly as like Nick says, finding some joy. And so just if anyone thinks that like to be a good artist you need to be sad all the time, that's not true. Like you can be really happy artists, and I think it's really important that we just engage with the possibility that exists, because thinking that I had to be miserable to make good work just made me miserable.
Yeah, actually that's very good. I have definitely made very good work being very miserable, but fundamentally I was really miserable at the time. And so none of that work really counts. Like I've made like lots of work that I don't want to engage with myself anymore, so it doesn't go into like collections, or I don't send it off to anthologies, because it's from a time that was really bad.
Beth, should we, before you have any other questions, should we throw this out to the floor?
Yeah, definitely. So if you can see the question A box on the bottom of your screen and you start typing your questions into there, that'd be great.
Whilst people think of them, do you have any other?
Yeah, so my last question, well, I've got lots of questions, but the last question for now was, are there any young voices you're excited about at the moment?
Really good question.
That is a really cool question.
It is.
God, what counts as young?
Younger than us.
Younger than us, okay.
I have two off the top of my head.
I had two.
Cool. Do you want to go, Liz?
Yeah, so there is a poet, well, writer, because I think she writes like prose and stories as well, called Shannon Clinton Copeland. She, I think she's from Kent originally, and I had the rather terrifying experience of, I taught her when she was at school, and like she came to one of my workshops. I think she was like doing her GCSEs or something, and then like last year I went into, and I taught her in London, and then last year I went into a gig in Norwich and she was performing, and I was like, you are not, no person who I have taught anything to can possibly be at university now. That's terrifying. And she is making incredible work. She's written a pamphlet which I think is brilliant, which I think a publisher should snap up when they can, and she's just a really cool multidisciplinary artist. She writes about like having like dual Jamaican and Irish heritage. She's got great hair, like she wears good t-shirts, and she's just this incredible performer, writer. So yeah, Shannon Clinton Copeland is one of the artists that I'm most excited about right now.
Along the lines of kind of poetry and kind of spoken word, like Deanna Roger is a really cool person to look out for. So very much kind of performance, but within that kind of realm of the page as well. So like really inspiring across the board, whether you're kind of writing for performance or you're trying to put together like a pamphlet or collection. Really, really interesting stuff to look at.
Deanna Roger wrote a really cool thing for BBC Sport for Black History Month, which was just like, because like poetry and spoken word get used a lot in like advertising and stuff, and I speak as somebody who has written one of those. Like mine was rubbish. Deanna's is amazing, and so like yeah, check out Deanna Roger.
Cool. Also, Iris Colomb, if you want someone who's doing kind of weird and wacky things with writing. So Iris is a poet, like very much kind of doing a lot of performance stuff, but like has kind of things published in kind of magazines and collections as well. But like the majority of Iris's work is kind of playing with form and kind of linguistics in terms of like what language even is and why poetry is what it is, like through really interesting experiments. So if you're looking for something to kind of make you think a bit different, try Iris Colomb.
Maria?
I haven't listened to a lot of contemporary music recently. Do you know what I mean? My musical choices have kind of been stuck in the 70s for a while. So I'm not sure how I would answer that question. I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to bow out.
There's a really cool Norwich. Well, actually, she may not even be Norwich based anymore. But there's a woman called Taryn I
know Taryn. Yeah, she lives in Paris now, doesn't she?
She lives in Paris. Taryn Everton.
Yeah.
Yeah, she makes music. She does photography, and she does some writing as well. But she is a phenomenal sort of like multidisciplinary artist. She's been a big part of the Young Norfolk Arts Trust and the Young Norfolk Arts Collective. And she makes really, really cool stuff. The other person is Tilda Arminger. Nick, you need to check out Tilda Arminger. I will send you some stuff. She is incredible. And she also lives in Paris now, I think, which is unhelpful. But Tilda makes like weird stuff.
It might be worth saying that we will put all of these into like the chat or send them out some way so everyone will get them afterwards.
That's a really good idea.
Because that's a lot of names.
That is a lot of names. Cool. Making a little list. Do you want to take a question from the audience, and then I'll make my list.
Yeah, I couldn't write them down quick enough. So one of our participants has got a really pertinent question about how to deal with a lack of self-confidence or imposter syndrome around your work. Actually feels like that's something quite a lot of artists, especially new artists, struggle with. Or he or they.
Oh, it's a great question. And like, it's a particularly great question because like, how do you deal with that? Like, I imagine that everyone here on this panel has dealt with imposter syndrome at least once. Like, I don't know what the answer is.
I don't think I've dealt with imposter syndrome. I've definitely dealt with a lack of self-confidence. How do you deal with it? Yeah, this is tough.
I wonder, so like, I find like creative and imaginative acts, especially so like with imposter syndrome. I was really feeling imposter syndrome about 9 months, a year ago. I was feeling very creatively stuck. I felt like I wasn't getting booked for gigs. I felt like everything that I was doing was all about, was all sort of like me talking about being an artist and not actually being one. Like, it felt like I was, not publishing enough. Any publishing that I did, I felt like, it's just ephemeral. It just goes the minute and I was finding it really, really difficult. And I was getting really jealous of everybody else's, specifically their Twitter bios. Everybody who had like writer, producer, author of these books and these books. And I was feeling really like lacking in self-confidence, really like I was imposter for having anything like resembling the word poet in my Twitter bio. And so what I did is I wrote a 5 years time ridiculous Twitter bio, like Lewis Buxton is a writer who has won a Nobel Prize, the Booker Prize, and I just like made the most ridiculous lie about myself, and it sort of made me feel better. I'm not quite sure why. I think it's a sort of speech act, like you say something and it almost comes into being for a moment. But I allowed myself to like revel in my imagination, in my sort of like all that childish joy that I felt for making the stuff when I was like 16 or 17, lugging a guitar around Islington. And I let myself just enjoy it, which sort of leads on to the thing that like I recognized that the thing that makes me feel most safe, the thing that makes me feel most at ease with myself and doesn't make me lack in self-confidence, doesn't make me feel imposter syndrome, is writing and performing. When I'm actually doing it and I'm in the work, I don't feel any of those things. It's when I go on Twitter or I go on and I interact with the rest of the world, even actually being at like an event, nobody has ever turned to me and been like, "You're not a poet." Like that's all like
It's
weird
internal,
exterior
yeah.
stuff.
That's totally it, isn't it? It's like it's in your head, isn't it? It's comparing yourself to other people, and that's what causes it. And as you say, Lewis, once you're in the work, you don't have the space in your head to compare yourself to other people.
So, not having headspace for it is brilliant.
So
kind of just elaborating on that, like I think that you've hit it right there, Lewis, with the fact that the feeling that you get for imposter syndrome, like the feeling itself, the really kind of visceral hit of I'm not worth it, is passing. Like it comes from a particular piece of stimulus, and then as long as you can find a way to get out of it, you can beat it. Like about a week ago, so like I suffer from imposter syndrome. I suffer from imposter syndrome every so often, and like the most recent one was kind of a week, 10 days ago, when I was trying to write an application for residency. It was very specifically like a fine and visual arts residency, and it was asking for things that like I'm researching and kind of studying in my work. But when it came down to the bit of tell us about the work that you make, I suddenly kind of locked up and it was like, I've been making video games for the last like 4 years. That's not art. That's stupid. And the way that I say this just as an example because I think it can help, though it's not the only way out of these things, is like I called up a friend of mine who is also an artist and someone who I like respect hugely, and who I can be really honest with and kind of like candid with, and said, I'm feeling this really kind of horrific thing. I don't know what to do. I can't finish this application. Help. And they kind of looked at my application, chastised me a bit for being like silly in myself, because like it was all kind of coming from this place that I had made myself. And we just worked through like the things that I had written down and talked about why they were art and why they are valid and why they fit. So like if finding someone external to you, like a person, any person is external to you, like finding a person who you can talk to when you are feeling these things is a really good way of having someone to kind of work through it. I recommend, very briefly, if you, and if anyone listening, if you're a person who does kind of suffer from imposter syndrome or any kind of debilitating kind of mental health condition during your practice and your work, have a look at there's a great zine and production company called Femzine, and on their Instagram stories at the moment, an artist called Abby Palmer has put together a story about writing a mental health plan for when particular things go wrong. And it's just like, it's like we did at the beginning. It's like really simple lists for what to do in particular situations, like great times, slightly difficult times, really bad times, and you kind of just have a step by step. And it seems so simple, but it's so effective.
Yeah.
I will also make sure that both Abby Palmer and Femzine are reiterated and sent round everybody who has been part of this. What's the next question, Beth?
It was just
now we've crushed imposter syndrome.
Someone had a similar question about just before a performance, do you feel nervous? And do you have any tips or tricks for calming your nerves?
That's a Maria question, definitely.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel nervous. Sometimes I don't. I don't tend to get too nervous when I perform, because I kind of like go into this state where I wouldn't exactly call it combat, but it's almost this state of like, right, you take a deep breath and it's like, right, I'm going on stage, and there's this. I can't explain. You kind of, it's almost like you put yourself at slight odds with the audience. This is just a musical thing, a musical performance thing. So I'm sure it's different for other forms of performance, but I personally put myself at slight odds with the audience, and so it's kind of like I'm not expecting them to like me. It's kind of like, I don't care if you like me anyway. Do you know what I mean? That kind of like thing. And then once you sort of like go on stage with that kind of like attitude, then it's, but not in a sort of like, oh, I'm so great thing, but just in this kind of, don't know, then that seems to kind of make the whole performance a lot easier. And then you kind of start interacting with the audience, and there becomes this two-way kind of to-in and fro-in of thing. But that's kind of like how I deal with it.
I do the opposite.
Right. Okay.
Like, I don't get nervous until maybe 5 minutes before I have to go on stage. I'm very cool for like the whole day, and then just before I go on stage, and at the moment, just before like I come on a Zoom thing, if I'm performing or something, I get nervous like the minute, just when I sit down in front of my laptop, which is very weird. I have two quite specific ways that I deal with that. One is I think that like performance for me, and all like language and poetry for me, are like embodied acts. Like they all come from my body, which is the same place that like nerves come from. Like my emotions and my bodily state are very sort of intertwined. So I tap every bit of my body. I like go down my whole body and tap every bit. And then I say a thing that the poet Kayo Chingonyi taught me, which is, he said, oh, I just go and stand in a corner and I say, I am here in this room with all of you, which sounds really sort of like hippy dippy, but like it really helps like center me. And then I go on stage, and so I do that. I stretch. So like you can like, if you come and find me at a gig, like just before I go on, I'm almost always like stretching my quads or doing some weird like yoga bending thing, which again makes me feel like I'm more in my body. And I breathe, like I try and breathe in and out through my nose, out through my mouth. And it's like those three basic things make me feel more embodied, and they make me feel less nervous.
I'm exactly the same as Lewis, that I'm absolutely fine all day for any performance, and then like 5-10 minutes beforehand, just complete overwhelming nerves. Like, yeah. and I know it's coming like every single time. Like I have not done a performance in any medium or format where that's not happened, and I wish I had a cool as routine as you. Like that's really cool, Lewis.
I'll try it. But you look very odd in the corner of a room. Especially because like I don't get a green room or anything. I'm not that.
We're poets, come on.
And if I ever have got like, they've been like, oh, you can just stand in here, like this cupboard. I'm like, yeah, brilliant. I'm going to be in the cupboard tapping myself.
Yeah. Like mine is very kind of mundane, but actually like I think it's quite similar in the outcome of just I have a set of things that I do to make myself to make sure that I know that I will be as comfortable as I can be. But that's things like going for a wee. Like I just go for a wee like 10 minutes beforehand, because I know that if I go on stage and I think about needing to wee, I might need to wee. And I make sure I'm hydrated, and I've probably had like a snack, like a tracker bar or a penguin bar 15 minutes beforehand. Like that's it. Like for me, just if I know that I've done everything I can do to make sure I don't faint, I'll be fine.
On the weeing thing, definitely go for a wee. But here's a top tip: and I can only speak for those people in the audience with male bodies, don't wear grey trousers. Never wear grey trousers, because if something goes wrong, it's a nightmare. And don't wear grey shirts either, because if you get hot on stage and you sweat, then that doesn't look good. So those are my top tips for feeling comfortable on stage, being like, my fly's not down, I'm not like, you know, looking weird or anything. Moving on from my bodily excretions.
Beth, over to you.
Helen's got a great question, I guess, especially now about digital fatigue, and she's personally struggling with being able to be creative when constantly losing focus and going on Twitter. Do you struggle with this, and do you have any strategies to curb this problem?
I can struggle with that from time to time. I think who doesn't? I don't know, but what I do sometimes is I've tried various things. I've tried putting limits on my social media activity. That doesn't really work for me, because then the limit comes up and I'm just like, I'll just have a look at that. But I find that what works for me is like setting aside a certain amount of time to do something really impossible, like saying, okay, right, so I've got 8 hours today. I'm going to write 10 songs in 8 hours. And they'll be like the most awful songs, but out of those there might be like 1 or 2 ideas that, you know, you sort of think, yeah, actually I can do something with this. But I find that if I set myself a really strict task, then that can keep me off social media. Yeah, and just trying to be more disciplined. Having deadlines, that often does it. Yeah, if you've got something to work towards.
I really don't like rules. Like, if someone tells me I can't do something, I'm a bit contrary, and I'll immediately feel like I can, even if that person is myself. I find it's not useful for me to say, like, you're not allowed to go on Twitter all of today. And so often I try and rephrase the question to myself. This is like a technique that I've like learned from going to counselling, and being like, rather than saying you're not allowed to do that, I ask myself, do I want to do that? Like, do I want to go on Twitter right now? Or do I want to check my emails? Do I want to go on Instagram? And then if the answer is yes, then do it. Like, allow yourself that. It might be a way of like your brain taking a break. It might be a weird form of inspiration. Like, I have been known to see a tweet and be like, right, okay, I'm going to use that as the first line of a poem. It might also just be mindless scrolling. That's fine. But yeah, if I ask myself, rather than like, you are not allowed to go on social media, rather than that, asking myself, do you want to go on social media now? That's a better question. In the same way as like saying like, and then I'll give yourself other options. Like, do you want to go on social media? Do you want to go and stand in the garden? Do you want to go on social media? Do you want to go and splash your face with water? Do you want to go on social media? Do you want to go and bake some scones? Like, and yeah, that's actually something that's only just occurred to me that I'm going to now try and do. But yeah, ask yourself what you want. Chances are you don't want to go on Twitter.
Yeah, I actually fit quite neatly between Maria and Lewis there, that like, not that against the rules, but if I don't want to do it, I will circumvent them, but just quite, that's just it. Like, I did the same as Maria. I put kind of limits on my phone and my computer to not use Twitter, and immediately found out that I could just go into an incognito browser to get past that. Yeah. And then when I realized I could do that, I just turned it off because it didn't make sense anymore. But yeah, like Lewis is saying, that actually, like, if you want to use Twitter for a bit, then that's okay. Like, what I found is best is to, if I know I want to sit down and do some work, is take 20 minutes beforehand and do a little scroll, but do it like away from the space that you're working. Like, yeah, that's if you can separate your habits from the place where you want to be creative, then it's a lot easier to not drift into that again. So like, I only use Twitter on my phone, unless it's very specifically like a work thing, and I try to like limit that as much as possible, because it's just not kind of helpful for my other creative practice. But yeah, like if you just get it out of the way beforehand, and also like as Lewis was saying, like if that might not be what you want to do, it might just be like a kind of Twitch habit. Like we've all got into this, like being indoors for the last kind of year. It's a place where you're constantly given noise, and not all of that noise is information, but it's like hearing a radio in the background. It's quite comforting to have something coming at you regardless of whether you're like taking it in or not. So like why not like take an active choice to search for a thing that you are interested in on Twitter, even like find a hashtag about like experimental poetry, or find like an aquarium's Twitter feed, but something that you're actively looking at as opposed to just letting the kind of scroll wash over you. I find that keeps your head in like the right place for like just being focused on day-to-day life, like regardless of whether you're making or not, like it kind of keeps you zoned. Another step is like just taking off Twitter completely. Like if you just want some noise, go over to YouTube instead, because then you can again search for something that is just a little bit closer to what you're interested in, and it's not just kind of every single person all at the same time kind of giving you their hot takes, because that's just not great. I don't know if that helps in terms of the creativity part of the question. We're all just so focused on Twitter. It's so bad.
Cool.
Joe asks, what would your advice be for multidisciplinary artists pursuing multiple careers in the arts?
Nick,
this might be really backwards. I see that this is from a person called Joe. Joe, could you possibly very quickly write what you mean by multiple careers? And then I will have a very good answer for you, I promise. Because yes, I'm absolutely a multidisciplinary artist. I didn't go into a kind of cross-disciplinary practice to have different careers at the same time. Like I very much, God, that's exhausting. I very much want to be doing one thing at a time, regardless of whether that's across different kind of practices. I think.
Is it useful to like I think we could all on if I'm not a multidisciplinary artist, but I have lots of, has Joe responded? Cool.
Yeah, so for Joe just responded saying, for example, being a musician and an artist at the same time. That's a great elaboration. What's the difference between those two, and why do they have to be different careers? I very much am a kind of musician and an artist. They both kind of fit into different parts of my practice, but I try not to think of them as separate careers. Like they are different strings to the same bow of the work that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. Also, like kind of bringing it right back to the kind of lists again at the beginning, like I think that was a really useful anchor for this whole conversation, that find out which one you're really passionate about and which one you're really good at, and think about using those, think about which one you actually want to be doing as a job and start there. And more often than not, the other one, the thing that you also really enjoy, will find its way in as well. Like there is no reason why poetry, for example, has to be 7 lines on a page, put it into a book. Like that's one really small aspect of writing.
Yeah.
Like some of my favorite artists, like one of my favorite kind of poets at the moment is also a drummer. And he did a show kind of finished last year where his spoken word show was him at a drum kit, drumming at the same time. Antosh Wojcik, check him out, he's really, really good. But he does not see that as two separate careers. Like he makes a lot of beats and he kind of does a lot of production, but these all fall under his kind of live literature career. I guess what I'm saying is you don't need to separate the two. Find what you love and put your energy into that, so you don't get tired.
If you can find an umbrella that covers everything, brilliant. But if not, so like my umbrella is poetry, and then I am a producer, and I'm an educator, and I'm a poet, and I'm a performer. And there are, in fairness, there are times, like a very specific example is that as a producer, I get money to send artists in schools. and so I can limit the cost to a school because I have funding from elsewhere, so I can send an artist into that school. I sometimes have to make a decision for myself when a school approaches me and says, we'd like you to come into our school. Do I send myself in there, or as a poet and an educator, or do I put on my producer hat and send in another artist at a different rate? And so like, there are some very tangible places where I have to make decisions about those things. And that is sometimes tricky, but definitely if you are just thinking like, I am an artist and I'm a musician and I'm sort of interested in graphic design or something, then like coming back to that thing that Nick said earlier about like constantly evolving in and out of different labels, and saying I'm an artist, I'm a classical musician, I'm a whatever. And just allow yourself to do that and don't throw up too many barriers to yourself. Allow the sort of osmosis between cell walls to happen naturally. Because
at the end of the day, it's all you're just an artist, Joe. Do you know what I mean? You being a musician is an artist, being a fine artist is an artist, being an illustrator is an artist. I guess just see yourself as an artist, and that's it. You know,
100%.
And, yeah, don't limit yourself.
A multi-skilled artist, right? And again, like, this is a slightly cynical part of me, but I'm like, damn, if you can say, if we're thinking about specifically careers and employment, like if you can say to someone, yeah, sure, I can write a score for your short film. I could also do like graphic design on the credits or something. Like you might double your fee, you know? You never know.
Fairness as well, like being a DIY musician, it's kind of like that's kind of what we do as well in Sink Your Teeth. We write the music, produce the music, perform the music, do the artwork, take our own photographs, shoot and edit our own videos sometimes, you know, so it's kind of we're doing loads of different things ourselves as well, but we still kind of like see ourselves as musicians, but there are other hats that we wear while we are, you know, as we are musicians as well. So it's I don't know.
That's good.
Well, equally, I am rubbish at like any sort of like, I'm a bit of a technophobe, and like the idea of like filming and editing a poetry film for myself scares the living daylights out of me. And so I have made it my career, again, this comes into being a producer, into being like, right, who do I know who's really good at that thing? And who can I get on board to do that for me? So that I can just do the art that I want to do. And again, what am I good at? What am I not so good at? What do I need somebody else's help with? What things do I love doing and what things don't I love doing?
And do what you love doing, Joe.
Ecosystem.
Taking that umbrella idea, just very, very briefly, I think that's actually that might be a really good way of bringing your kind of many disciplines together. Because actually, like, while Lewis's umbrella like looks like poetry, like that is a thing where everything radiates out from. Like, for example, my umbrella at the moment is actually the things that I'm interested in terms of what I want to explore. So like, I would think of my umbrella right now as being the way people communicate on the internet about grief. Like, that's a very specific, but like also not like, you can't, that's not like saying watercolors. So if you find something that you do that you are passionate about, like the thing that you want to be exploring, and you want to do this within an artistic and creative arts context, then actually like your media, whether they are kind of through musicianship or visual artistry, like they are all the kind of just tools to the one career that you want to kind of pursue.
Can I jump in there, because I'm aware that we're at like 6:30, and that idea of like the thing that you are passionate about and then the tools and the media that you want to use and bring them together, that feels like the perfect summing up of everything that we have been talking about, right? So like, so like, thank you so much. Beth, do you have any final things that you wanted to say?
Just thanks everyone for your really thoughtful questions, and for Lewis, Nick and Maria for your really rich and honest discussions. I feel like I've learned a lot and feeling very inspired.
Thank you so much for having us, Beth.
Yeah,
It's been really fun.
So much, Beth. Quick thank you to the Young Norfolk Arts Trust. If you want to find out more about the rest of the things that are happening this week, it is all on youngnorfolkarts.com/engageworks. You can find them on Twitter, on Instagram, and then Maria can be found on Twitter at SinkYateeth, YATETH. Nick on Twitter is currently Cassette Witch. And you can find him at nickmurray.
You got to say it.
Nickmurray.horse.
Yes.
Yes, mate. You can find me at LewisBuxton93 on Twitter, or at LewisBuxtonWriter on Instagram, or lewisbuxton.com. This has been a genuine delight and a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your insightful questions. Thank you to Maria. Thank you to Nick. Thank you to Beth. Thank you to the Young Norfolk Arts Trust. We will see you soon. Have an amazing creative career.
Bye.